plan to handle the losses. We will continue to monitor it, and the tariffs are all within the benchmarks and are recommended for approval as requested. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. Any issues, questions? If there's none, may I request we move on to recommendations on page 54, paragraph
Mr.
9.
Kumete's hand is up. I don't know whether it's approval.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't.
Maybe
I was looking down.
Ms.
Mr.
Hatting,
Kumete?
if can assist.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to raise a flag issue here, maybe just and it may apply to a whole lot of these applications. When you're talking about losses, I think the question that we may also need to deal with, the truth that we also may need to deal with is, and the question that needs to be answered is, how much of those municipalities actually have functional meters? There is theft that comes from bypassing of things and things like that, but how much of the losses are actually due coming out of meters that people are just not metering? So that's the first issue for me, because I'm not sure whether with any of the changes, if people are not measuring something, how do they know? Yes, they know how much they purchased from a supplier. They know how much revenue they got from it, or how much of the power they can account for. But then the difference is losses. But how much of those is because they are not measuring properly? Because going forward, I think that's the one thing that is fundamental that we need to deal with, that we need to have meters, whether those meters are analog meters or smart meters, but we have to install meters as a start, such that at least a decision that is, whatever that is being said is predicated on data. So we've got a data-driven regulatory framework. So I guess it's a comment and a question, but how much of these losses are actually can be accounted for by the fact that there are no meters?
Okay, Ms. Masike or Tatis Chotlo, do you want to come? It's a comment as well as a question.
Chair, I think
and maybe in our processes, when we get the plans, we may ask the municipality to really provide details on this. You may come in though, Mr. Sichotlo.
Yes, Chair, I think I know, and I think it's a valid question that Mr. Kumede is asking. And just that maybe in our letters that we send them to the municipalities, we'll include that part to say they must actually also highlight whether or not they've got faulty meters and how are they going to deal with that. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Kumede. I think it's an action that the team will take forward in terms of getting the data or the information from the municipalities. On that note, then may I then request that we move on to recommendations, which are on page 54, and they are that we approve the tariffs as recommended in the analysis, and they are for implementation on the 1st of July. And I think some of the points that members have raised that are similar to the issue of losses and other areas, let's include them in our correspondence to the municipalities. Members, by show of hand, can I get an indication you support the recommendation? Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. I do support Ms. Bassetti. Thank you, Mr. Kumete. We then move on to the next application, which is Thembelihle. Ms. Tanda.
Thank you, Chair. Thembelihle is applying for the guideline increase. All the tariff are within the benchmark except for commercial tariff was reduced to be in line with the benchmark, and the commercial three-phase increased by CPI. The municipality technical and financial performance for electricity department is not satisfactory as indicated by deficit and energy loss. However, the energy loss have slightly reduced, and NERSA will continue to closely monitoring the energy loss. I therefore recommend for increase, page 64.
Thank you. Members, any questions, issues of clarity or points of enhancements? If there are none, as indicated, recommendations are on page 64, paragraph 10, which are that we should approve the tariff analysis as recommended for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must submit their progress report on the implementation of the submitted energy losses reduction plan by the 30th of September. By show of hand, members. I do support. Thank you, Mr. Gumete, Ms. Mositi, Mr. Mkhize. We move on to the next application, which is Tanzabane. Mr. Ralufe.
Thank you, Chairperson, and everyone in the meeting. Tanzabane is doing well with finances, and even the energy losses are well maintained. It's applying within the guideline of 15.1%. However, for the sorry, for the energy charges where they are beyond the benchmark, they've been kept to the upper limit. And then I therefore recommend for an approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. Any questions, issues of clarity? If there's none, may I request that we go to page 71 with paragraph 8 on recommendations, which are to approve the tariff as recommended in the analysis for implementation on 1 July 2023 by show of hand, members. I support. Thank you, Ms. Maseti, Mr. Komete, Mr. Mkhize. We then move on to the next applications that are from the Free State Province. We'll start with the clubbing, Ms. Masiki.
Thank you, Chair. The clubbing's financial position and technical position is also not improving. The losses continue to increase, and they are operating also on a deficit, taking into account the guidance from Mr. Gumede in terms of the losses. We will follow that one up. The tariffs within the benchmarks, except for the one commercial one, which has been limited to the upper end of the benchmark. It is recommended that the tariffs be approved as recommended in the analysis sheet. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Masike. Members, any questions, issues of clarity, points of enhancement? If there's none, may I request that we move on to page 83, paragraph 8 on the recommendations, which is for the REC to approve the recommended tariff as per analysis done in the pages above, and the implementation thereof is going to be on 1 July 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the approval? Thanks, Mr. Kumete, Ms. Maseti. I do support. We then move. Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. We move on to the next application, which is St. Lake Southern Free State. Mr. Ralufe, again.
Thank you again, Chairperson. St. Lake is operating at deficit with energy losses at 25.5%. And then it's also indicated if energy losses were kept at 12%, that they will have an extra revenue of almost 9.1 million to the revenue, and that can take them to 5.6% surplus. And they've briefly gave us what they're working on with regards to energy losses, which will be followed up as per the guidance by the members. And then the tariffs are within the guideline. Where they've gone beyond the benchmarks, they've been kept to the upper limit, but the tariffs are within the guidelines, and I therefore recommend for approval. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Members, questions, issues of clarity? Just mute yourself, Mr. Ralufe. If there are none, may I request that we go to recommendations, which are on page 100, paragraph 9, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the tariff analysis tables for implementation on 1 July. By show of hand, members, let me get an indication that you support. Mr. Komete, thank you. I do support Ms. Maseti. And Mr. Mkiza, thank you. We move on to the next application, which is Masilo Nyana. It's yours again, and Dr. Ralufe.
Thank you once more, Chairperson. Masilonyana is currently operating at a deficit of 6.38 or 6.4%, with energy losses of 30%, and it is also indicated as to if the energy losses were 12%, what will look the extra revenue will be 15%, and a surplus of 21.6%. They've also provided us with what they're working on regarding actually the costs of the energy losses and what they're going to work on to deal with those energy losses. We're going to have to follow up with them as a regulator as of 30th September to see how they're improving for their own efficiencies in the electricity division. And the tariffs are within the guideline. Where they've been outside the benchmark, we have kept them to the upper limits of the benchmarks. And then I therefore recommend for approval. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you. Members, questions, issues of clarity? If there's none, may I request that we go to page 112, paragraph 9, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the analysis table for implementation on 1 July 2020. I think there's a 3 missing there, Dr. Rolofe. It's 2023. Thank you. Members, by show of hand.
Person, you're on mute.
Thank you, members. I've noted your support. We move on to the next one, which is Machabeng. It's yours again, Tate Ralufe.
Thanks once more, Chairperson, and apologies for the missing 3 on the 2023 on the previous presentation. With Machabeng, it's currently operating at a loss, at a deficit of 26.4%, with energy losses at 24.09%. Machabeng, if it was operating at 12% of energy losses, it will have an extra revenue of 197.1 million, and the surplus will be at 0.41, and it has an issues of overspending on the expenses, hence such revenue and such a lower surplus. And then if on the issue of energy losses, they've indicated under 2.5.1 the causes of the energy losses, and then 2.5.2 are the remedial actions that are taken to actually curtail those losses or rather reduce them. And then the municipality is applying at 15.1 as the guideline, and where the tariffs were beyond the benchmarks, they've been kept to the upper limit so that they are in line with NERSA as approved as guideline and benchmarks. And I therefore recommend for approval, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions, issues of clarity? If there are none, may I request that we go to page 127, paragraph 10. We'll correct the numbering there. Paragraph 10, which is the tariff must be approved, or the tariffs be approved as per the tariff analysis recommendation for implementation by the municipality on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must submit to NERSA their progress report on the implementation of the submitted energy losses reduction plan by the 30th of September. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication you support the application? Thank you, Ms. Masepi. Thank you, Mr. Msikiza, Mr. Kometa. I also support. We move on to the next one, which is Maxima Holo. Ms. Tanda? Mr. Sichotlo may come
Thank
in.
you.
All right, proceed, Ms. Tanda. I was asking Mr. Sichotlo to really assist in coming in where there are delays so that we can move with speed.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Tanda?
Apology, Chairperson. Maholo is applying for a guideline increase. All the tariffs are within the benchmark except for commercial, conventional, for school and churches. It was increased to the upper limit. The municipality technical and financial performance of the electricity department is improving as evident of the supplies and a decrease in energy loss. However, we will continue to monitor the energy loss report that was submitted to NERSA. I therefore recommend for approval page 140.
Thank you. Members, questions, issues of clarity or points of enhancements? If there are none, may I request that we move on to page 140 for paragraph 10 on recommendations, which are to approve the tariffs as analyzed and recommended. And this is for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must submit a progress report on the implementation of the submitted energy losses reduction plan by the 30th of September. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the recommendations? Thank you, Mr. Kumete, Ms. Maseti, Mr. Mkize. I do support. We move on to the next one is Motlaka. And Dade Rolofe.
Thanks again, Chairperson. Is Mutaka local municipality. It's based in Free State. It's actually operating at a deficit of 3.26. The energy losses are at 16, reasonably at 16.88. And it's also shown, should the energy losses go down to 12%, the municipality can generate a surplus of 11.8% with an extra revenue of 66.3 or rather 0.4 million. The municipality is applying along with the guideline of 15.1%, where they've gone beyond the guideline and benchmarks. The upper limit was utilized, and then I therefore recommend for approval, Chairperson.
Thank you, members. There's an application before you. Any issues? If none, may I request that Rolofe, please just mute yourself. There's an echo coming from your side. Thank you. Recommendations are on P 162, which is to approve the tariffs as analyzed and recommended to the REC for implementation on 1 July 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the recommendation as presented? Thank you, Mr. Kumete, Mr. Mkize, Ms. Maseti. I do as well. We move on to the next one, which is Nala. It's you again, Tate Rolofe.
Thank you once more, Chairperson. Nala local municipality is actually operating at a deficit of minus of 32.7% with energy losses of 18.62%. And then they've indicated that the deficit was mainly due to reduced bad debts by about 93% because the accounts were deemed to be uncollectible from customers. And then there's an issue as well on the expenses management with this municipality. This is indicated by when the losses are at 12%, still the municipality will still be generating a deficit. However, the municipality is applying along with the guideline of 15.1%, where the tariffs were outside the bench, where the tariffs were outside the benchmark, they were kept within or rather at the upper limit, and I therefore recommend for an approval. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Members, any questions, issues on this application? By show of hand, there's none. May I request we move on to page 160 to 161, where paragraph 10 on recommendations, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the tariff analysis and for implementation on 1 July. By show of hand, members. Thank you, Mr. Kumete. I do support. Thank you, Ms. Masetti, Mr. Mkize. We then move on to the next application, which is Mwate. It's yours again, Tate Ralufo. If you can just be brief and move with speed. Thank you.
Let me do so, Chairperson. Nala is currently operating at a deficit of 17.6, and then the energy losses are at 32.4. And then, Chairperson, under the energy losses, it's indicated how they're coming about and how they're gonna deal with them. Nala is the municipal Mwate is applying for 15.1%. All the tariffs are within the guideline, and I therefore recommend for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any questions, issues? If there's none, recommendations are on page 171, paragraph 9.1, which is to approve the recommended tariff as per the analysis for implementation on 1 July 2023. By show of hand, members, I do support. Thank you, Mr. Mkiza, Mr. Komete, Ms. Masetti. We move on to the next application, which is Nketwana. It's yours again, Tate Ralofe.
Okay, quickly, Chairperson, Ketwana is currently operating at a deficit of 18.8% with losses within the NERSA guide, benchmarks of 18.51. And Ketwana is applying for 15.1% throughout all its tariffs. Everything was perfectly at 15.1%. I therefore recommend for approval, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions or issues on this application? If there are none, may I request that we move on to page 179, recommendations, that we approve the tariffs as per the analysis done in the tables above the submission for implementation on 1 July 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the application? Thank you, Mr. Kumete, Ms. Masetti. I do support. We then move on to, Mr. Mkize, thank you. We move on to the next application, which is Pumelela. Ms. Masike.
Thank you, Chairperson. Pumelela is also based in the Free State. It's experiencing high deficit, and although the losses are high, it's an improvement from the previous cycle. They were running at around more than 30%. Now it's 23%. Taking into account the guidance from the members, I'm recommending that the tariffs be approved as applied for. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any questions or issues on this application? By show of hand, if there is none, the recommendations are on page 194, paragraph 10, which is to approve the tariffs as per the analysis and recommendations for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must continue to implement the plan that was submitted to NERSA and submit quarterly progress report on the energy losses to bring them down as per NERSA benchmarks. By show of hand, members. I support. Thank you, Mr. Kumete. Thank you, Mr. Mkize. Thank you, Ms. Masetti. We move on to the next application. It's yours again, Ms. Masike. Tukuluho.
Thank you, Chairperson. Tukuluho's position financially has deteriorated. The surplus has decreased from 8% to 1%, but the losses are within the the NESA benchmarks, it's recommended that the tariffs be, where the tariffs are higher than or outside the benchmarks, we've limited them to the upper end of the benchmarks. It is recommended that they be approved as per the analysis sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you, Ms. Massetti. You may come in.
Chairperson, I would like to understand the applicability of the recommendations, because if we recommend certain things to our licensee, it must be something that is implementable. Otherwise, it becomes unlawful. If we say they must adjust their tariffs in accordance with the benchmarks, yet we know that there's a High Court ruling that the benchmark approach is not appropriate, the average approach that we are using. So how are the licensees going to implement the recommendations that we are making as to what we want them to do? When they don't do it, it means they don't comply with the decision of the regulator. Of which decision is the decision that says do it according to the benchmarks, and we know that the benchmarks will not be applicable because it's not an appropriate approach. I just want to get clarification there. How lawful is that?
I see Mr. Kumede's hand is up. Mr. Kumede, you may come in, followed by Mr. Mkize. Mr. Kumede.
Chairperson, I just thought it'd be useful to assist the team on this one, because and Mrs. Chotlo will then add. But what we need to understand, I think, colleagues, is that the benchmarking approach, which is this whole methodology which we are using right now, the benchmarking municipalities, which is the whole approval process that we are going through, is what has been declared to be illegal. But we have a year until end of October this year, where we can use this. So the applicability of the benchmarking approach is that to an extent to which we use it within this until October, we can still reduce and bring tariffs to within benchmarks for those that want to. If not, they would have supplied a cost of supply. They've done a cost of supply study, and they would have justified why these things would have been higher, and those would then have had to go and serve at the ELS. But the methodology is still applicable until October. Yes, the question we are asking, Madam Massetti, is some of these recommendations is that once the methodology or the general approach of using benchmarking falls off, the recommendations that we are coming up with based on the benchmarking, how applicable will those recommendations be? It's something I think that we'll need to deal with later, but I think all of what is being said is said within this particular framework, which, yes, although declared illegal, it is still valid until October. I'm really hoping that assists. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kumede. Mr. Mkize.
On the first part, I'm partly covered by Mr. Kumede in the sense that this is also one of the issues that we outlined at the beginning, and then we said we're not raising them, not that they are not there. The understanding is that the moving to the upper limit of the benchmark of whatever that exceeds the benchmark will apply in this one. It's not to say it's going to apply going forward, because after this year, there is nothing really. We don't have this methodology as such. It's a new methodology that will then come into play. And then the issue that I also wanted to raise from my side on is that the presentation of these figures, somehow if you can just be consistent on it, and where you've got benchmark, it must be clear which row they refer to. We need to be very clear and specific in terms of the applicability of the benchmark, because sometimes you just write the numbers here, it's not so clear where they fall. For example, if you go to page 193 of 376, you've got the 2,2,48, and you see it's something, it can't be the correct number there. And sometimes we're using commas instead of full stops, and you don't know, just to be able to standardize on this. And also, like, even if you look there, there's a 2.61 no. So just that presentation is going to be important, even when it comes to us sending information to these licenses. It should be correct. That's what I'm saying. I think Mr. Short and the team will then go through this with a fine comb to make sure that whatever we present, there is no confusion that we bring in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mkiza. I think just to add on your point, we also caution the team to make sure that we meet the deadline set for the finalization of the methodology. Ms. Maseti, I see your hand is up.
Yes, Chairperson, it is up, and it is up for one reason, and this reason is that with the explanation from Mr. Gumede that the expectations for the municipality to adjust, my understanding is that when we make the recommendation for the municipality to look into aligning for the next period, not for the period under review, because then we don't have the specifics. We ought to have told them, because we're approving what is presented before us as recommended. So we are not telling them that on this one, then please adjust to the benchmark and do it this financially as of 1st of July. That's not what we are saying. So we approve as the but we are saying, now going forward, you must adjust according to the benchmark or align in line with the benchmarks. So that's my understanding. It is not for this specific decision, like the way that or the tariffs that are recommended that we must approve. But then going forward, they must try to align to the benchmarks. So that's why then I'm raising the concern that it may not be applicable for the next period. That is just for me the clarification that I needed. And because for this specific decision, I want to be clear. Are we saying to these municipalities, adjust now as of 1st of July and to align with the benchmarks? Or are we approving what is presented before us? And then we are saying, going forward, you must then align in accordance with the benchmarks, so that I'm clear with the nature of the decision that we are required to take. Thank you.
Mr. Gumede's hand is up.
I think the
Chairperson,
chairperson is on mute. Yeah. But maybe whilst the chairperson is unmuting herself, can I just answer Madam Maseti in terms of 15.2, as of the 1st of July, the municipality can't charge any other tariff other than that has been set or approved by the regulator. So the tariffs we are approving are actually for the 1st of July. What we are saying, as part of that approval, what we are saying is that these tariffs that are higher, if you want a tariff higher than what is within the as part of the methodology, the current methodology, if you want tariffs that are higher than the benchmarks, then that application needs to be supported by a cost of supply. If not, then we will limit the increase to those benchmarks. So that's what we've basically been doing even with the past set. So, but it's for the 1st of July. It's not for another period. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gumede. I may have missed some of your input. I don't know what's going on. Our power is off, but we're not due for load shedding. I'm connected via the phone. I will be assisted if I've missed something in relation to this discussion. Ms. Maseti, are you covered in terms of the explanation provided? I'm not sure if I'm muted. Can everyone hear me?
You audible, CEO. I think Ms. Maseti might be on mute.
Oh, okay. All right. I take it that her issue is adequately addressed by Mr. Komete. May I then recommend that we go to the recommendations that are on page 207, paragraph 9, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the analysis section for implementation on 1 July 2023. And that in order to address the low APP NSRP ratio, the municipality must submit a full cost of supply study for consideration by NESA before the beginning of the next tariff cycle. Members, by show of hand, can I get an indication that you support the tariff? Thank you, Mr. Mkiza. Thank you, Ms. Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Kometa. I also support. We will then move on to the next application, which is KZN province. It's Alfred Du. Mr. Shabalala.
Chairperson,
Can you assist?
yeah, I'm not sure what is happening. Yeah, I'm not sure what is happening with this one, but can I just maybe just let us pass and let me get through to Tab and see if I can assist, and then we can come back to you. Thanks, Chair.
Sorry. Thank you.
Sorry, Brian, can I assist with that
We'll
one?
move on to Drakenstein. Proceed, Ms. Matako.
No, it's
Ms. Mapiting. I want to assist.
Oh, Ms. Mapiting, sorry.
Thank you. Alfred Duma is situated in KZN province. The municipality is doing very well, as evidenced by a surplus, despite having a high energy losses. The municipality is applying for a guideline increase of 15.1%. The tariff are either within or below the benchmarks. Chairperson, we recommend for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mapiting. Members, any questions or issues of clarity on this application? If there are none, may I request that we go to page 222 for recommendations, paragraph 9, which are to approve the recommended, or rather the tariffs be approved as recommended in the tariff analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July 2023. The municipality to submit their report on based on their plan in addressing the energy losses, and this they should do starting on the 30th of September. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the recommendations? Thank you, Ms. Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Mkize. Thank you, Mr. Kumete. I do support. We then move on to the next one, which is in the Western Cape. It's Drakenstein. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Drakenstein is situated in the Western Cape. Its surplus and energy losses are within the NERSA benchmarks. It is applying for an average increase in line with the guideline. The tariffs are within the benchmarks or below the benchmarks. We therefore recommend for approval. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms. Matumbu. Members, any questions or issues of clarity on Drakenstein? If not, may I request that we move on to the recommendations. The recommendations are on page 248, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the tariff analysis, and the implementation thereof, it's 1 July 2023. By show of hand, members. Thank you, Mr. Kumete, Mr. Mkize, and Ms. Maseti. I also support. We then move on to the next applications that are in the Gauteng province. We start with the AE
CI in AECI Modderfontein. Ms. Mkhize. Can someone come in?
Can you hear me, colleague?
Proceed, Ms. Mkhize, please.
AECI is a private distributor located in Gauteng. They are making a small profit of 7%.
Can someone assist? I don't know, maybe it's me who can't hear Ms. Mkhize properly. Can we be assisted, or can we allow her to sort her connection and then come back to the application, if that's okay?
Yes, Chair. I don't know if I can hear me. I can assist.
Please come in, Dr. K.
Yes, thanks, Chair. AECI is a private distributor which is located in Gauteng. They have a very small network, hence the losses are quite low at 1%. So their tariffs are within the benchmarks. So I recommend the tariffs to be approved. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions or issues in relation to this application? I don't see any hand. On that note, may I request that we move on to page 248 and paragraph 9, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the analysis sheet, and as well as that fact that the implementation is on 1 July 2023. By show of hand, members. Thank you, Mr. Gumede. I do support. Ms. Hutton, please help me with the other.
Yes, Chair, all
members.
members' hands are up for the approval.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, members. We then move on to the next one, which is Lesedi. And Tate Ralofe.
Thank you, Chairperson, once more. Lesedi is, excuse me, Lesedi is currently performing at a deficit of 4.79, and then with energy losses of 25.2%, and then Lesedi throughout its all tariff structure is applying for 15.1%. Everything is in line with the guideline, and the upper limit was utilized where there was a stretch on the benchmark. So I recommend for an approval, Chairperson.
Thank you. Members, any questions on this one? Lesedi? If not, may I request that we move on to page 257 on recommendations, which is to approve the recommended tariffs as per the analysis done in the analysis sheet, and this is for implementation on 1 July 2023. By show of members. Thank you, Mr. Gumede. Thank you, Ms. Maseti. And Mr. Mkhize, I do support as well. May I then request that we move on to Midval, Dr. K?
Yes, good morning, Chair. Again, Midval is applying for an increase of 15.1%. Their financial indicators are reasonably well. They have a surplus of 6.8%, and their losses are within the respectable range. There were issues with residential tariffs, especially block 1 and 2, which were falling outside of the benchmark range, which I had to limit, as well as agricultural customer tariffs, which were limited. But other than that, all other tariffs are falling within the benchmarks. So I recommend the tariffs for approval. The recommendations on page 275 of 376, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. K, members, any questions, issues of clarity or points of enhancement on this application? I don't see any hand. Then may I request that we move to the recommendations as directed, page 275, paragraph 7, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended. And this is for implementation on 1 July 2023. By show of hand, members. Thank you, Ms. Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Kumete. Mr. Mkize, I do support as well. We'll move on to the next application, which is in the applications in the Limpopo province. We start with Elias Motswaledi.
Thank you.
Ms. Kekana.
Thank you, Chair. Elias Motswaledi is applying for 15.10%. It is operating at a percentage deficit of 15.72 due to increase in bulk purchases and depreciation. The APP NRSP is low. The Munich is adding a low markup to tariffs. It's operating at increased energy losses of 20.99%. The industrial low tariffs, the commercial and agricultural tariffs are not aligned to the benchmark. The recommendations are on page 22. We therefore recommend approval as applied for.
Thank you, Ms. Kekana. Members, any questions or issues? I don't see any hand. As directed, the recommendations are on page 297, paragraph 9, which is to approve as per the tariff analysis for as recommended in the tariff analysis sheet. And this is for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality be requested to submit a smart energy losses report on a quarterly basis, starting on 30th September 2023, to enable NESA to closely monitor their energy losses. By a show of hand, members, can I get an indication of support? I do support the application. Thank you, Mr. Kumete, Ms. Museti, and Mr. Mkize. We then move on to the next application within the Limpopo province, which is LIM 368. Ntate Modise.
Good morning, Chairperson, board members, NERSA colleagues. LIM 368 was formed by a match between Mokopong and Mudimul. When we look at their technical and financial performance, there is an improvement when we compare to the previous year. And hence, we will request the municipality to submit the quarterly progress report to monitor the energy loss reduction implementation. Going to the tariffs, all the reader increasing by a guideline increase of 15.10%. We therefore recommend for approval. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, members. Any questions, issues? If none, the recommendations are on page 316, paragraph 8, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must submit quarterly progress report on the implementation of the smart energy losses reduction plan. By show of hand, members, I support the application. Thanks, Mr. Kumete, Mr. Mkize, I think Ms. Maseti. We then move on to the next application, which is Mukhala Kwena. That MDC is yours as well.
Thank you, Chairperson, once again. Mukhala Kwena performance assessment showed that they are operating with the lower surplus level and the energy losses that are above the NERSA benchmark. Hence, they submitted the energy loss reduction plan, which was assessed and found to be acceptable. Therefore, they will be requested to submit quarterly progress report for continuous monitoring. The recommendation is for the tariff to be approved as they are all adjusted by guideline increase of 15.1. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, members. Any issues that you may have on this application? If there's none, may I request that we move on to the recommendations, which are on page 326, paragraph 9, which is to approve the tariff as per the tariff analysis, as provided in the analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must submit its quarterly report based on SMART principle for implementation, or starting with on the 30th of September. By show of hand, members.
Chairperson, all members approve, and you seem to be on mute.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, members. We move on to the next application, Ms. Kekana on Mole Mole.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mulamula municipality is applying for 15.10%. The municipality percentage deficit has it's operating at a decreased percentage deficit of negative 7.25. That's due to total income, due to other income. The APP NRSP ratio is low due to low markups. Energy losses have increased due to beta tempering. All tariffs are within the benchmarks. We therefore recommend for approval as applied for.
Thank you. Members, any issues on the application? If there's none, the recommendations are on page 334, paragraph 8, which is to approve the tariffs as per the tariff analysis for implementation on 1 July, and that the municipality submit a SMART energy losses report on a quarterly basis starting on the 30th of September for NESA to closely monitor their losses. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the application? Thank you, Mr. Kumete. Thank you, Mr. Mkize. I do support. Ms. Hutting, I think I'm struggling to see Ms. Massetti's, and let me know if her hand is up as well.
She has supported her.
We then. All right, thank you. We move on to the next application, which is Tabazimbi. Thank
you, Chairperson. Once again, Tabazimbi municipality operated with a deficit, and the reason for this deficit is a low collection rate and also the NMD penalties that were incurred. Hence, the municipality will be advised or requested to submit the credit control measures to improve their collection rate and also to negotiate with Eskom to upgrade on their NMD. Moving on to the tariff, they are all increasing by guideline, and we therefore recommend for approval. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, MDC members. Any questions or issues? If there's none, the recommendations are on page 300.
Apologies, Chair, Ms. Massetti's hand is up.
Oh, okay. Thank you for helping. Ms. Massetti?
Chairperson is a legacy hand. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, no. The recommendations on 347, paragraph 9, which are to approve the tariff for implementation as recommended, and the implementation date is 1 July 2023, and that the municipality be requested to have a revenue enhancement strategies to improve the revenue collection to at least 95% in line with best practices, and that the report on the negotiation with Eskom to increase the contracted NMD in order to avoid penalties relating to the NMD. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the application or the recommendation as presented? Thank you, Mr. Mkize, Kumete, Mr. Kumete, Ms. Massetti, and I do support. We move on to the Mpumalanga province applications. We start with Dr. Pixlika Seme. Dr. Pixlika Seme, Ms. Tanda.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm going to present Pixley Kaseme in Mpumalanga. I just want to raise to the members that yesterday evening, I received the revised tariff application, which I was told that the council set yesterday and revised the application. So the application is above the guideline. The application is 18.70%. However, the municipality previously applied for a guideline increase as per the tariff analysis sheet that we submitted. The municipality had a problem with ESCOM, so their energy loss have increased above the benchmark because of the problem they experience, and the municipal performance is not satisfactory. All the tariffs are within the benchmark. I therefore recommend for approval for page 357, taking into consideration the new application that I received yesterday night.
Just to confirm, Tanda, the information you received last night, are you saying you did adjust this application to reflect or to take into account the additional information provided to you last night or not? If you can clarify that. Let me also tell you, Ms.
Unfortunately, it was late. Everything was submitted, so I didn't. And again, it's above the guideline. So all the public hearing, it was late for yesterday evening.
Oh, okay. All right, Ms. Masetti.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm not sure, Chairperson, if then this matter is ready for a decision, because we cannot ignore the new information. I'm not sure then if the REC will be the appropriate decision making structure, especially if there's an indication that there's feedback, Chairperson, and I don't know about stakeholders that are following this meeting, if there's feedback like this. Thank you.
She's muted.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just not sure if we should even spend time discussing this matter as opposed to perhaps take it to the meeting of the ELS, which is this afternoon, at least so that we can properly consider the new information that was provided, and carefully look into what the new information entails and the decision of the council that was that set yesterday. So I'm not sure if we want to proceed with that or take it to the ELS and give the staff members an opportunity to carefully look into that and adjust the recommendations and analysis for the ELS, and we can accommodate it in the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Masetti. I see, and Justice Shotlo, your hand is up.
No, Chair, I think Ms. Masetti has taken my words. We will rather maybe bring it to the ELS with the updates, and then the ELS would be the right committee to submit to approve that, because it's even above the guideline. And also on top of that, they did not even present at the public hearing, so this might just be a longer discussion at the ELS and not at this committee, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, members, there is a proposal. I can't see any other hand, and there's a proposal on the table to say that based on the fact that there is additional information received last night, that information needs to be factored into the application, and that since the additional information implies that the request is above the guidelines, which does not fall within the delegation of this committee, we request that this application be submitted to the ELS in the afternoon. And I trust that the team will have time to go and reconsider the additional information and make a submission to the ELS. Members, by show of hand, can I get an indication that you support the proposal?
Chairperson, I see Mr. Mkiza's hand is up.
Is it? Oh, okay. Thanks. Mr. Mkiza, you may come in.
Noting what Madam Masete said, I'm just requesting the team that they work in conjunction with the regulator RSU to look at whether are we having a new application, is it additional information, and all of that, so that we don't waste time discussing those issues in terms of the validity of the new information and which application are we actually having. Has this application been retracted as is and a new application on the table and all those things that go with it? If they can sort it out so they don't really waste our time. We know we already don't have time because these must come into effect from the 1st of July. If they can just please do that as paid work. I was not expecting even the tabling of this nature here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mkize. Members, by show of hand, can we then support the recommendation that the application be taken back for the team to analyze it, take into account the additional information that has been provided, and also that it should work with the RSU in terms of a submission of this public application to the ELS. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the withdrawal of this application for and send it back to the team? Thank you, Mr. Gumede, Mr. Mkize, Ms. Maseti. I support that. We move on to the next one.
Chairperson. To work with LAS as chairperson, not necessarily RSU. Thank you, Chair.
I beg your pardon. Yes, with LA, to work with LAS. Thank you, Ms. Maseti, for the correction. May I then move on or request that we move to application number 30, which is Emma Lahleni MP. Ms. Kekana.
Thank you, Chairperson. Emma Lahleni is applying for 15.10% increase, guideline increase. The percentage deficit has increased to negative 1 to 1.26. That was due to financial interest, depreciation, NMD, and bad debts. The municipality indicated that it's finalizing its application on Circular 124 ESCOM debt relief, which once approved will see ESCOM freeze the interest charged on the area debt with the condition that the municipality honors the current account in full for a period of 12 months. After 12 months of no interruption of the monthly payment agreement, ESCOM will write off 25% of the area debt as at March 2023. The agreement is to continue until 100% of the area debt is written off. The AAPP over an NRSP ratio is low. The municipality is adding low markups to tariffs. The energy losses had also increased, and the commercial and industrial and time of use tariffs are not aligned to the benchmarks. I therefore recommend for tariffs to be approved. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Ms. Kekana. Members, any questions, issues? I don't see any hand. The recommendations are on page 307.
Apologies, Ms. Maseti's hand is up.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, this is now a second municipality this morning that is still battling with the issue of the NMD penalties. I think also it will because we have to look at some of these other costs and the relevance of these costs that are imposed on municipalities and the adverse impact of such cost. So if we can also flag this as something that we need to look into as the regulator, the relevance of the NMD and the impact that it has, given the fact that municipalities are struggling with their debt, and they also add a cost to that debt, and whether really there is still a case for the NMD, also given the what you call the tight supply constraints
and the intense load shedding, and whether really the NMD is still something that must be implemented in the way that it is being implemented. Just to flag that, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Masetsi. Is there any other hand, Ms. Hutton?
None, Chairperson.
Okay, all right. On that note, then I would then request that in terms of the issues that we need to be flagged, we will add this one as well in relation to the NMD penalties, in that we need to look at its relevance and as well as whether there is still a case just for the NMD to be in place. In terms of that will be an addition to the recommendations that I'm going to reach on the record for this particular application. And the other one is that we approve the tariff as presented in the analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must submit its report, its SMART report on energy losses reduction plan to ensure that they reduce their losses within the required benchmarks, and also that the budget needs to be allocated and spent in support of this. The implementation plan, together with the budget, must be monitored on a quarterly basis through a report to NERSA, a biannual report starting on the 30th of September. And lastly, the municipality be requested to submit a plan detailing how it intends to reduce the high interest from ESCOM in relation to its bad debts. By show of hand, members, I think I've added the recommendation coming from Ms. Masetti on the issue of the NMD. Thank you, Ms. Masetti, Mr. Mkize. I do support. Can I get an indication that Mr. Assist me, Ms. Hutting, Mr. Gomete, is he supporting?
Chairperson, I saw Ms. Masetti and Mr. Gomete's hand is up now, yes.
Mr. Gomete, thank you. Members, I must apologize. As I said, our power just went off. We're not due for load shedding, hence I'm connected via my phone. And I may not be seeing all your hands, so Ms. Hutting will continue to assist me. We then go on to the next application, which is Makado. Mr. Mudise, over to you.
Thank you once again, Chairperson. The financial and technical indicators of the municipality fall well within the NERSA norm, with an exception of the APP NRSP ratio, which is below. The reason for low ratio is due to the domestic customer, both prepaid and conventional. They are consuming at the first two blocks, which the markup is very low. Moving on to the tariff, the across the board guideline increase is proposed and is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Members, any questions, issues of clarity or points of enhancements? If there are none, the recommendation on the second batch of the applications, I think it's numbered page 10, the green stamped page 10. Recommendations are on paragraph 9, which is to approve the recommended tariffs for implementation by the municipality on 1 July 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the applications? Thank you, Ms. Masetti, Mr. Mkize, and Mr. Komete. I do support. We move on to the next application, which is MEGA. It's yours again, Mr. Mudisi, which stands for Mpumalanga Economic Growth Agency. That the Mudisi?
Thank you, Chairperson. MEGA is a private distribution.
Just hold on, Ms. Masetti. Oh, I think it was a lingering hand. Proceed, Dr. Mudisi.
Thank you, Chairperson. MEGA is a private distributor situated in Mpumalanga province. Technically, they are doing okay, as indicated by energy losses that are within the range. But financially, they are unsustainable due to deficit level they have recorded. Due to energy losses that they were recorded. the municipality will be requested to implement the credit control measures to avoid further revenue losses due to bad debt impairment. Recommendations are on page 17. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Mdisa. Members, questions, issues of clarity? If none, the recommendations are on page 17, paragraph 9, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the tariff analysis sheet. And these are to be implemented on 1 July 2023, and that the licensee should be requested to develop and implement the measures for improving the revenue collection rate to 95% in line with NERSA benchmarks. Members, by a show of hand, can I get an indication that you support the recommendation? Thank you, Mr. Mkize, Ms. Maseti. I do support. Thank you, Mr. Komete. We move on to the next application.
Chairperson, I
Yes, Ms.
support also with maybe addition on the recommendations there to look into the issue of cross subsidization there, Chair. They are below the benchmarks there. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, members, do you support with that addition of issue of cross subsidies? I don't see any objection to that, that will be added to the recommendation. Thanks, Ms. Maseti. We move on to the next application, which is Mkondo. Ms. Kekana.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mkondo municipality is applying for 15.10% guideline of 15.10%. They are operating at a decreased percentage deficit of 20.43 due to an increase in revenue generated from sales of electricity. They have the APP NRSP over NRSP ratio is low, as since they're adding low markups to their tariffs. They're operating at decreased energy losses of 36.24 due to bypassing of meters and meter tampering. The commercial and industrial large tariffs are below the benchmarks. We therefore recommend for the tariffs to be approved as applied for. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Members, thank you, Ms. Kekana. Members, any questions or issues of clarity on Mkondo's application? If there is none, the recommendations are on page 27, paragraph 9, which is for the RC to approve the tariffs as recommended in the analysis sheet. Implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must provide NERSA with the progress report on how it's going to curb the high energy losses starting on the 30th of September 2023. By show of hands, members, can I get an indication that you support the application? Thank you, Ms. Maseti, Mr. Komite, Mr. Mkize, I do support. We move on to the next one, which is Ngomazi. Ms. Kekana.
Thank you, Chairperson. Ngomazi municipality is applying for a guideline increase of 15.10%. The percentage deficit has decreased to a surplus of 0.69, and the increase due to increase in total revenue from sales generated from sales of electricity. The APP over NRSP ratio is low, since they're adding low markups to their tariffs. They're operating at decreased energy losses of 16.15%. The commercial tariffs are not aligned to the benchmarks. We therefore recommend for the tariffs to be approved as applied for.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions, issues of clarity on this application? If there's none, the recommendations are on page 29, paragraph 8, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must be requested to submit to NERSA its smart energy losses reduction plan, which will ensure that the losses are reduced to be within the benchmarks, and also that appropriate budget be allocated and spent on this. And the implementation plan The implementation of this plan together with its budget must be monitored on a quarterly basis through a biannual report to be submitted to NERSA starting on the 30th of September 2023. Members, by show of hand, can I get an indication that you support the application? Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. Ms. Maseti, I do support. Mr. Kumete, thank you. We move on to the next application, Tabachewu. Ms. Kekana.
Thank you, Chairperson. Tabacho municipality is applying for 15.10% a guideline of 15.10%. Tabacho municipality's percentage deficit has increased to negative 105.60. That is due to interest expense, NMD, depreciation, and high bad debts. But the municipality indicated that they had entered in the previous year. They had entered into a waiver agreement with Eskom, so they are all still currently paying off. They're now currently paying off the part of the waiver agreement. Hence, the increase in the percentage deficit. The APP NRSP is low. They're charging low tariffs, and they have energy losses. They have energy loss. They have energy losses, and the commercial and commercial, industrial, and time of use tariffs are not aligned to the benchmarks. We therefore recommend for all tariffs that are not aligned to the benchmarks. We therefore recommend for the tariffs to be approved.
Thank you, Ms. Kekana. Please try and relax. Members, any questions or issues on this application? If there are none, the recommendations are on P64, paragraph 8, which is for the REC to approve the tariffs as per the analysis provided in the analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July, and that the municipality must submit its smart losses report or on a quarterly basis to NERSA starting on the 30th of September, so that NERSA can closely monitor the management of the energy losses. And Mr. Mkhize, and also to submit a detailed plan on how they'll reduce the high interest and NMD penalties in order to reduce the percentage surplus, and that the municipality must align its tariffs that are below the benchmarks to the NERSA benchmarks levels. Members, by show of hand. Mr. Mkhize, I saw your hand. I don't know whether you wanted to ask a question. Oh, okay. Members, by show of hand, can I get any? Thank you, Ms. Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Mkhize, Mr. Kumente, and I do support. The next application is Victor Kanye. Ms. Tanda?
Chairperson, just a comment. I had raised my hand actually for a comment on this one. That I think
apologies, I missed your hand.
Yeah, I support the actual recommendation. However, I mean, for me, though, I think the challenge, and I don't know how we express this, for anybody who can only account for half of what they bought, it doesn't matter what kind of scheme they have. The National Treasury can come off and write off your debt. But the next moment, whatever that you buy, if you can only account for half of it, you are just on a road to nowhere. So I don't know to what extent, because that's I mean, I hear all of the other arguments around whatever tariff at which they buy from Eskom and NMDs and stuff like that. But for me, the key issue here is that can you at least whatever that you've sold, collect at least 90% of that. If you can't account for half, there is nothing else that can be done until you fix that.
Okay. That's noted, Mr. Mkhize. Maybe as the team, we really need to flag that as part of the recommendation. I think, it should come out strongly in our recommendations, and that is a short law if we can ensure that throughout the other applications as well. Members, I think we have voted on this, that we do support it, and noting the point made by Mr. Gumede for the team to also pick it up in their recommendations. On that note, may I request that we go to
Chairperson?
Mr. Kanye? Yes, Mr. Seti.
Chairperson, in the recommendations, aren't they supposed to address issues of smart meters because you can see the energy losses are high, but at the same time, it seems they're also battling with the collection of debts from customers. So I think there's a need there that for the team to engage on what is it program that they are going to implement in order to address those issues.
Thank you. I thought they were addressed in the recommendations as read out or as recommended on page 64. If they are not captured in the manner that Ms. Maseti, you would want them to, maybe that is shortly, if you can assist that we capture them in that manner, because there is a recommendation that the municipality must submit a plan on how they will be managing, or rather continuous reports on how they are managing their losses, and as well as on the issue of the NMD penalties. So if it's not coming out in the manner that you would want it to be, that is shortly, may I request that you assist the team in rephrasing the request. But the point made is noted. Can we then move on to the applications under the Eastern Cape Province? We'll start with the Blue Crane, Meliburu.
Sorry, Chairperson, Victor Kanye.
Sorry? Oh, did I skip Victor Kanye? Oh.
Yes.
Oh, apologies. I apologize. Ms. Tanda, you will come in. Sorry, members, and sorry to everyone.
Okay, Victor Kanye is applying for a guideline increase. All tariffs are within the benchmark, except for commercial conventional low and single phase reduced to the upper limit. The performance not satisfactory due to deficit and energy loss. As per the explanation in page 69, I therefore recommend for approval page 73. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Apologies once more. Members, any issues on this application from Victor Kanye? Can you just mute yourself? I think there's someone who's not muted. Are there any issues that you may have or you would want to raise on this application? If there's none, may I request that we go to the recommendations on page 73. And the recommendations are that the tariffs be approved as per the tariff analysis sheet and recommendations. And this is for implementation on 1 July 2023. And that the municipality be requested to submit a progress report on the implementation of the submitted energy losses plan starting on the 30th of October. By show of hand, members. 30th of September, I beg your pardon. Thanks, Mr. Gumede. I support Ms. Maseti, Mr. Mkize. Thank you very much. We then move on to Blue Crane, Ms. Libodo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, members and colleagues. Blue Crane municipality is applying for an average increase of 15.10% in line with the approved guideline. The municipality is operating at a surplus, showing some improvement, a small improvement in the energy losses that have reduced by 3.41%, although they are still above the tolerable ranges. However, the municipality has provided a report on how this will be dealt with. The report we're analyzing and monitoring it on a continuous basis. All the tariffs are increasing within the guideline and benchmarks. It is therefore recommended that the proposed tariffs be approved as applied for on page 84 of 393. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Members, any questions, issues on this application? If there's none, the recommendations are on page 84, paragraph 8, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must ensure that their higher losses are dealt with to bring them in line with the benchmarks, and that the municipality be directed to implement a plan submitted and provide NERSA with updated report explaining progress made on a quarterly basis, starting on the 30th of September 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you do support the Blue Crane application? Thank you, Mr. Mkhize, Ms. Maseti, Mr. Gumede. I do support as well. We move on to the next one, which is Buffalo City. Ms. Matlako.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, members and colleagues. Buffalo City is applying for a guideline increase of 15.1%. The municipality is operating at a deficit of 20.71%. There is some improvement in the level of energy losses from the previous year. In terms of the high deficit levels, the municipality have submitted a cost of supply study, which was partly assessed, and it does show that the municipality is under recovering from most of its tariff categories. The municipality intends to restructure its tariffs based on the results of the cost of supply study once it has been approved by NERSA. This will hopefully have a positive impact on the municipality's deficit levels. In terms of the tariffs, all the proposed tariffs are within the approved benchmarks. Some are even below the benchmarks, and the proposed tariffs are recommended, Chair, for approval as listed under Section 7 of the analysis sheet that is reflected under page 91 of 393. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions or issues on this application? I think maybe your pages, Ms. Matlaku, is not aligned to ours in terms of the board pad. The recommendations are on page 107 and paragraph 9, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended for implementation on 1 July 2023, that the municipality monitors plans executed to reduce the energy losses and submit the progress report by the 30th of September 2023 to NERSA. Members, by show of hand, can I get an indication that you support the application? I do support. Thank you, Mr. Gumede, Ms. Maseti, and Mr. Mkhize. We then move on to the next application, which is Grade K. Ms. Liburu.
Thank you, Chairperson. Grade K is a very small municipality in the Eastern Cape province. It is applying for an average increase of 15.10%. This municipality belongs to those in ICU. It is underperforming in all its operation, in all its aspect of its operations. The energy losses are very high, and the municipality is not managing its expenditure, thereby having a negative impact on their profitability. All the tariffs are increasing within the benchmarks and the guideline. We therefore recommend for approval, page 117. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Ms. Liburu. Members, any questions, issues? I think this is a municipality that will go to our ICU list. If there's none, we go to recommendations as indicated, page 117, paragraph 9. Which was to approve the tariffs as recommended in the tariff analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must continue to monitor the plans undertaken to reduce the high energy losses and provide an update on the progress made to NERSA on a quarterly basis, starting on the 30th of September. And that the municipality needs to continue to improve its surplus levels. And lastly, that the municipality is required to manage its credit control measures to be financially viable. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you approve? Thank you, Mr. Kumete. I do support. Thank you, Ms. Massetti. And thank you, Mr. Mkize. We move on to the next application, which is Mangana. Ms. Liburu.
Magana is also applying for 15.10%. The financial and technical performance of the municipality has shown some improvements as reflected by the increase in the surplus level and the reduction in the energy losses. All the tariffs are increasing within the guideline and benchmarks, except for those for the domestic conventional 20M single phase scale 4 tariff. However, the tariff was limited to the top of the benchmark range. It is therefore recommended that the proposed tariffs be approved as applied for in page 135. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Ms. Liburu. Members, any questions or issues on this particular application? If not, as indicated, recommendations are on page 135, paragraph 9, which is to approve as recommended the in the tariff analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July 2023. That the municipality be required to continue to monitor the plans put in place to reduce the high energy losses and submit the progress made to NERSA on a quarterly basis starting on the 30th of September, and that the municipality be required to manage its inefficiencies by addressing the high expenditure on electricity account in an effort to sustain its financial health. Members, by show of hand, can I get an indication that you support the recommendations? Thank you, Ms. Massetti. I do support. Thank you, Mr. Kumete and Mr. Mkize. Thank you. We then move on to the next application, which is the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. Ms. Matlaku.
Yes, thank you once more, Chairperson. For this one, just before I move on, the first page of this analysis sheet shows that it's an ELS submission. It's actually an REC submission. The municipality is applying for a guideline increase of 15.1% increase. In terms of the technical and financial indicators, the municipality is operating at a deficit of 12% and energy losses of 22%. The municipality did submit a energy loss report, which was assessed, and we will continue to monitor the performance of the municipality going forward. In terms of the tariffs, so even though the municipality have an approved cost of supply, the municipal council took a stance to stick to the 15.1% guideline increase for this financial year. All the proposed tariffs are within approved benchmarks, except for the two commercial prepaid tariffs, where the municipality was introducing basic charges for those two categories. And the average increase for these have been limited to a guideline increase because for these two tariff categories, the cost of supply study results showed an over recovery, and therefore these have been limited for that reason. Everything else is within benchmarks and is recommended for approval, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Matlaku. Members, any issues on these applications that you may have, please do raise them by show of hand. If there's none, the recommendations are on page 161, paragraph 11, and the recommendation are that the tariffs be approved as recommended for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality is required to give progress report on its refurbishment and replacement project of old infrastructure, and that the municipality must monitor the plans executed to further reduce its energy losses and submit its progress report to NERSA starting on the 30th of September 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the recommendation as presented? Thank you, Mr. Kumete. Thank you, Ms. Massetti. I do support, and thank you, Mr. Mkize. We then move on to the next application, Rainbow Mhlaba. Ms. Matlo.
Good morning, Chairperson, members and colleagues. Raymond Mhlaba Municipality is applying for an increase that is within the guideline. The financial and technical performance are not satisfactory. The municipality has submitted a report on how to deal with energy losses, and the report was analyzed and it will be monitored. Tariffs are increasing by the guideline and within the benchmarks, and the recommendation is on page 172 of 393. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Maclou. Members, any questions on this application? If there are none, as indicated, recommendations are on page 1. Ms. Maseti?
Chairperson, we may want to just tweak the way that we articulated the alignment with NERSA benchmarks, starting from page 8 there, where we would normally say block 3 was limited to gradually align with NERSA's benchmark. So I don't think that we'll have gradually aligning. We have already done the adjustment there, and then the gradual alignment, it's something of the future. So let's just be specific there. It's a once-off alignment if it does need to be an alignment, so that we are clear of the specific tariff that we are approving. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Maclou, should we, I think, correct that the block 3 was limited to be within NERSA benchmarks, as opposed to adding. Okay,
Thanks,
right.
Chair. Thanks, Chair. We'll correct that. Yes.
Okay. In terms of the recommendations on 172, paragraph 10 is that we approve the tariffs as recommended for implementation on 1 July, with the correction that has been made on page 8 on block 3, and as well as that the municipality must monitor its energy losses in line with the set plan until they are within the NERSA benchmarks, and that the progress must be submitted to NERSA on a quarterly basis starting on the 30th of September. On that note, members, can I get an indication that you support the application with that correction made on the block 3 on page 3? Thank you, Mr. Kumete. I do support. Thank you, Ms. Maseti, and thank you, Mr. Mkize. We move on to the next application, which are applications Madibeng, which is within the Northwest Province. Ms. Sekhoi.
Thank you. Madibeng is applying for increase for 15.10%. The municipality is one of those that are struggling, as it has the energy losses of 44%. But the municipality submitted the report, but still the energy losses are going up. So, and if the municipality were to reduce the energy losses to 12%, they'll have a surplus of 17%. So, on the recommendation, I'll add that the municipality must submit the report, the quarterly report, starting from 30th of September. I didn't add that. I just said that they must continue to monitor. So I'll add that recommendation. And then when it comes to the tariffs are within the benchmark, except for 2 domestic tariffs that have been limited to protect customers from high tariffs. I'll remove the alignment to the benchmarks. I'll remove it. So to protect customers from high tariffs, 2 domestic customers, and then 1 industrial low tariffs that has been, the increase has been limited. So I recommend for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions or issues on this application? If there is none, the recommendations are on page 1.
My hand is up, Chairperson.
Oh, yes, Ms. Masiti, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson. Okay, thank you, Chair. Chairperson, if you look at the domestic tariffs here, I'm looking at the various charges that are added by this municipality that is not doing very well, and it's got a basic charge and service charge and the energy charge. That's a lot for the customer, for the domestic customer. And it's not as if its tariffs are very low. If you also consider the purchase price, the average purchase price, and you look at its selling price. So the tariffs are not low. So I'm looking at those charges, and I would like to get reasonable justification for having these various charges levied on the customer. It's a lot of these fixed charges that are there for the customer, and still the customer still pay sort of a variable cost for the energy that it consumes. Can I get clarification on this, Chair? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McClough.
Okay, Mkangoli. On this issue of the basic charge and service charge, we have been communicating with municipalities on these charges for the past years, but they were not doing anything about it. But the municipality now submitted the COS study that's going to be approved maybe August or September, and they are also introducing the seasonal tariffs. So when we do the analysis on those the proposed structures, then we'll have to ensure that this is not repeating on the new season introduced tariffs.
City, are you covered? I'm not sure if. Let me take Mr. Mkhize. But Miss Khwadi, just try and answer the question, because I think the issue is it justifiable for us to approve the domestic tariffs with those elements in it as outlined by Ms. Masetti? Just come up with a response on that.
Maybe
Mr. Mkhize?
Maybe Bongan can help on that too. Dr. Konjulai.
Okay, let me allow Mr. Mkhize to come in. Or was it a lingering hand, Mr. Mkhize?
I think it will also help to be clear regarding our jurisdiction on some of these charges too. And also to understand if there are any surcharges that go with that, because just for one to be properly appraised may not necessarily be on this one, but I think that it's important that we get a overall picture in terms of the actual increase that's going to hit the customer at the end of the day, generally, and what is within our jurisdiction and what is outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. K, can you assist?
Yes, Chair. So we did receive a cost of supply study from Matibing, which we are busy assessing. So yes, it's quite true that, so in terms of the electricity pricing policy, it requires that for your typical low consuming customer, they must just have an energy charge, which you can see there. So when a tariff is unbundled, then you would have all the charges. So all these costs are a part of the cost of supply, but to the extent to which they are impacting on customers, we would assess that, because there must be a balance between the recovery of fixed cost as well as the energy, which is a variable, Chair. So in our analysis of LCOS, would bring that to members to look at once we've done that analysis. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Masetti, are you covered?
I'm covered by that explanation, because I clarified exactly the part of what are the fixed costs that we can allow. It's very important that we are quite aware of the fixed cost that we must allow, and then there are variable costs. So if now there's going to be energy charges, there's going to be basic charge, there's going to be service charge, there's going to be demand charge, it's a whole lot of things. So we need to just be clarified, because in one fixed charge, the recovery of fixed cost is very important, and you may find that the municipality still, in terms of its cost, it's covered. Then you deal with the variable cost. So we can't just load consumers with so many charges, and we're not aware what is the makeup of the fixed costs. Thanks. I'm satisfied with the way forward in addressing these charges. Thank you.
Thank you. On that note, Mr. Mkhize, I hope you're also covered, because there's an indication that these are aligned with the EPP. On that note, can we then move on to? Oh, you want to come in, Ms. Khwadi? Oh,
no, I'm covered. I'm covered because, as I said, I'm not just looking at this. It's been going forward. we should be able to understand what is within our jurisdiction, what is not, and also to have a sight as to what actually hits the consumer at the end of the day. So I'm covered. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, sir. Page 185, recommendations, paragraph 9, which is that the tariff be approved as recommended in the tariff analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July, and that the municipality must monitor its energy losses in line with the plan, with the third plan until they are within NERSA benchmarks. And this, I think the addition there is that the must be regular or quarterly reports that are going to be requested from the municipality starting on the 30th of September, as this would assist NERSA to monitor and ensure that there is improvement in the financial performance of the municipality. On that note, members can get an indication that you support the recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. Ms. Maseti, I do support. Thank you, Mr. Kumete. We move on to the next application, which is City of Osana. Dr. K.
Thanks, Chair. So the biggest issue with Matosana is the losses, which are sitting at 38%. They are not making a surplus and a deficit of 8.86%. Their tariffs are already sitting above the benchmark range. So those are the challenges that we have. So we'll monitor the losses of this municipality over time. So they've identified a number of challenges which they are addressing, such as the overloading of the network, the meter reading, and the meter tampering issues, which we will monitor and ensure that they are addressed going into the future. So in terms of the recommendations, Chair, they are starting on page 198 of 393 to page 199 to recommend the approval of the tariffs. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. Members, questions, issues on this applications? On this application? If not, recommendations as directed on page 198, paragraph 9, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must submit a progress report to monitor the reduction of the energy losses starting on the 30th of September, that the municipality be required to establish metering for municipal buildings, robots, streetlights, water and sewer treatment plants, and pumping station. Members, the recommendations by show of hand, can I get an indication that you support them? Thank you, Mr. Mkhize, Ms. Maseti, Mr. Kumete, I do support. We then move on to the next application, Abakulusi.
Thank you, Chair.
Ms. Mapite.
Thank you, Chairperson. Our Kulusi municipality is applying for a guideline increase. The financial and technical performance of the electricity business within the Munich is not satisfactory, as indicated by the deficit and energy losses. Chairperson, the tariff are fine, and the recommendation is on page 211. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, members, or issues on this application? Ms. Hatting, I'm not sure what's happening with my board pad. Can I just be assisted?
There's no hands, Chairperson.
Okay, thanks. I'm just saying on the board pad, I was trying to move to recommendations. Can you just assist in reading them into the record for me? My board pad has just hung up. Apologies, members.
Chairperson, the recommendations can be found on page 211. It states that it is recommended that the tariffs be approved as recommended for implementation on 1 July, that the municipality must increase its budget and repairs and maintenance to bring it in line with NERSA's requirement of 6%. And then the last one is that the municipality must monitor its energy losses in line with the set plan and submit the NERSA quarterly progress report commencing from 30 September. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that, members. Can I get by show of hand that you support the recommendation? The recommendations. Thank you, Ms. Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Mkhize, Mr. Kumete. I do support. I think Board pad has been refreshed. We'll move on to the next one. Damplas, Mr. Ralufe.
Thank you once more, Chairperson. Damplas is a private distributor located in Free State, and it has reflected improvements as it can be witnessed by a percentage surplus of 13.99, almost 14% of a percentage surplus, and the energy losses which are within NESA's range of 7.19. Damplas only have two tariffs, which is the summer and the winter tariff. They are all within the guideline, and the benchmarks I therefore recommend for approval. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you. Members, any issues on this application? If there's none, the recommendations are on page 215, paragraph 7, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the tariff analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you do support the recommendations? Thank you, Mr. Mkize, Ms. Maseti, Mr. Komete. I do support. We move on to the next one, which is Dipaliseng. Ms. Tanda.
Thank you, Chair. Dipaliseng applying for a guideline increase. All tariffs are within the benchmark. However, the technical and the financial performance of the electricity department is not satisfactory, as evident by deficit and energy loss above benchmark. Municipalities have submitted a detailed reduction plan as per page 221 of the analysis sheet. NERSA will continue monitoring the progress. I recommend for approval, page 227. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tanda. Members, any issues on this application? Please mute yourself, Ms. Tanda. I don't see any hand from members. Recommendations as indicated is page 227, paragraph 10, which is to approve the tariffs as per the analysis recommendations for implementation by the municipality on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must submit their progress reports on the implementation of the submitted energy losses reduction plan starting on the 30th of September 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the recommendations? Thank you, Ms. Maseti. I do support, and thank you, Mr. Mkize and Mr. Komete. We then move on to the next application, which is Edumbe and Tate Shawalala.
Good morning, Chairperson and members. Thank you. Edumbe municipality is situated in the KwaZulu-Natal province. The municipality's performance is not satisfactory, and this is indicated by a financial deficit and energy losses that are above NESA benchmarks. The municipality in this regard will be required to monitor its losses in line with the plan that has been submitted to us. The municipality is actually applying for a guideline increase, and all the tariffs are either within the benchmarks or below. The tariffs are recommended for approval in line with Table 7, and the recommendations are on page 234 of 393. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Members, any questions or issues on this application? If there's none, the recommendation as indicated on P34, it's paragraph 9, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must monitor the performance of the energy losses in line with the said plan and submit quarterly reports to NESA starting on the 30th of September 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the recommendations? Thanks, Ms. Maseti, Mr. Mkize, Mr. Komete. I do support. We move on to the next application. It's yours, Ntate Chabalala Inkosi Langalibalele. Over to you.
Thank you once again, Chairperson. This municipality is also situated in the KwaZulu-Natal province. The performance of this municipality is satisfactory, and this is evidenced by a surplus while the energy losses are on the lower end of things. The municipality is applying for a guideline increase of 15.1%, and all the tariffs are either within the benchmarks or below. The tariffs are recommended for approval in line with Table 7, and the recommendations can be found on page 249 of 393. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Ndati Chabalala. Members, recommendations 249, paragraph 8, which is to approve the tariffs as per the tariff analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July. By show of hands, members, can I get an indication that you support the recommendation? Thank you, Mr. Mkhize, Ms. Maseti, Mr. Komete. I do support. We then move on to the next application, which is Ghana Land. Ms. Botha.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, Chairperson, members and colleagues. Ghana Land has got performance of sorry about that. Ghana Land's performance is satisfactory, technically and financially, highlighted by the percentage surplus of 10.39%, which has significantly improved from the previous period. And this is due to the municipality being able to reduce its expenditure. They are applying for a guideline increase at 15.1%. All their tariff categories are increasing either within the benchmarks or below. We therefore recommend approval, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any issues on these applications or points of enhancement? I don't see any hands. May I request that we then move on to page 261, paragraph 8, with recommendations that the REC must approve the tariffs as per the tariff analysis, and also that the tariffs are to be implemented by the municipality on 1 July 2023. A show of hands, members. Can I get an indication that you approve the recommendations? Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. Mr. Maseti, I do, Mr. Komete, I do support as well. We then move on to the next application, which is Garibek. Ms. Mabinya.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, Chairperson, members and colleagues. Garibek is situated in the Northern Cape. They are applying for a guideline increase. The performance indicators are concerning, as indicated by the surplus and the energy losses. The municipality is on night save, and they have previously been applying for below guideline increases, which has affected its revenue inflow. They've submitted reports on how to deal with the issues that are outside NERSA benchmarks. The report has been analyzed and monitored, and going forward, they'll be requested to submit further reports on how they plan to deal with the issues. Tariffs are below the benchmarks, and recommendations are on page 274, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mabinya. Members, any questions or issues of clarity on this application? If not, the recommendation is directed on 274, paragraph 9, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality should continue to gradually align its electricity tariffs, particularly commercial and industrial, to the energy regulators benchmarks for improved revenue inflow, and that the municipality should introduce a demand charge to industrial customers in order to improve its revenue position, and that it should monitor the increasing energy losses to minimize any negative impact on the percentage surplus going forward, and that it should increase its collection rate to NERSA's acceptable range in order to improve its surpluses. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you do approve the recommendations? Thank you, Mr. Mkize. Mr. Kumete, Ms. Maseti, I do support. We move on to the next application. Tati Shabalala, it's yours. Kwatukuza.
Thank you once again, Chairperson. Kwaduguza is actually situated in the KZN province again. This municipality's financial performance has actually declined as evidenced by shrinking surplus while the energy losses are on the rise. This municipality is applying for a guideline increase of 15.1 and the tariffs are all either within the benchmarks or below. The tariffs are recommended for approval in line with the tariff analysis table, and the recommendations can be found on page 293 of 393. Just the note on the energy losses, they will continue to be monitored in line with the set plan, and we will recommend that they submit quarterly progress reports on 30 September. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Dr. Shabalala. Members, any questions? If done, the recommendations are on PA 293 and the recommendation are that the REC must approve as recommended in the tariff analysis, or rather approve the tariffs as recommended in the tariff analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July, and that the municipality be required to submit to NESA the progress report on the reduction of its energy losses starting on the 30th of September 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you do support or do approve the recommendation? Thank you, Mr. Mkize. I do support. Thank you, Mr. Kumete. Thank you, Ms. Maseti. On that note, we move on to the next one, which is Maluti Pofung. Ms. Maseke.
Thank you, Chairperson. Maluti Pofung is based in the Free State Province. It is also one of those that we can classify as being on ICU. Although the technical and financial indicators have improved, they are still not within the necessary required levels. There has been a task team that has been appointed by DMRE to lead with assisting the municipality, as it's got one of the highest outstanding amount owed to ESCOM. And the negotiations are in progress, and there is currently that political task team to address some of the issues that the municipality is grappling with. But then also ESCOM has obtained a court order attaching the licensee's assets, and the municipality has then been placed under administration. Issue of the losses, they have actually decreased. Sorry. The losses have decreased, but yeah, it's worrisome. The financial and technical position of the municipality. The tariffs are all increasing by the guideline, but the tariff structure is different from the existing benchmarks. So we don't necessarily have benchmarks on which to peg or compare the tariffs. So we are recommending that the guideline increase of 15.1% be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Masike. Members, any issues on this application? Other than to say we need to edit on our list of ICG municipalities. I don't see any hand. Members, the recommendations are on P308, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the tariff analysis sheet, and this is for implementation on 1 July 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the application, having noted all the other issues relating to this municipality? Thank you, Ms. Maseti, Mr. Mkize, Mr. Kumete, I do support. We then move on to the next application, Mantopa Ms. Tanda.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mantupa is in a Free State province, is applying for a guideline increase. Their performance, technical and financial performance is not satisfactory as evident by deficit and energy loss above benchmark. However, the municipality have submitted a detailed reduction plan as per page 303 of the analysis sheet. I therefore recommend for tariff to be approved as per page 323. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Tanda. Members, questions, issues of clarity or points of enhancement on this application? If there are none, the recommendation is directed on page 323, paragraph 10, which is to approve the tariffs as per tariff analysis recommendations for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must submit their progress report on the implementation of the submitted energy losses plan, submit progress starting on the 30th of September 2023. Members, by show of hand, can I get an indication that you support the application or you approve the application? Thank you, Mr. Mkize. I do support. Thank you, Mr. Kumete. Thank you, Ms. Maseti. We move on to the next application, which is Mohale City. Ms. Khadi.
Thank you. Mohale City is applying for 15.10% increase, and the municipality is doing well financially and technically, and all the tariffs are within the benchmark. So I recommend for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khadi. And members, any questions or issues on this particular application? If there are none, the recommendations are on page 341, paragraph 6, which is that the REC is recommended to approve the tariffs as recommended in the analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you do approve the tariffs as recommended? I do. Thank you, Mr. Mkiza. Thank you, Ms. Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Komete. I also support. We then move on to Newcastle, Ndati Chabalala.
Thank you, Chairperson. Newcastle municipality is situated in the KZN province. This municipality is actually doing well, and this can be seen by municipality having a surplus, and the energy losses are actually quite low. The municipality is applying for a guideline increase of 15.1%, and the tariffs are all either within the benchmarks or below. The tariffs are recommended for approval in line with the tariff analysis table, and the recommendations are on page 354 of 393. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary. Members, any questions, issues on this particular application? If there are none, the recommendations are on page 354, paragraph 9, which is for the REC, to approve the tariffs as recommended in the analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you do approve the recommendations? Thank you, Mr. Mkize. Thank you, Ms. Maseti. I do support, and thank you, Mr. Komete. We move on to the next application, which is Osborne. Ms. Matumbu.
Thank you, Chair. Osborne is situated in the Western Cape, and its surplus and energy losses are within the NERSA benchmarks. It is applying in line with the guideline of 15.10. Its tariffs are below the NERSA benchmarks, and the ones that are above the benchmarks will be limited to the upper end of the benchmark, and then therefore recommend for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions on this applications or issues that you may have picked up? If there are none, the recommendations are on page 372, which is for the REC to approve the tariffs as per the tariff analysis recommendations for implementation on 1 July 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you approve the recommendations? Thank you, Mr. Mkize. Thank you, Ms. Maseti. I do support, and thanks, Mr. Kumete. We then move on to the next one, which is Rain Konyeni and Tatisha Balala.
Thank you, Chairperson. Renkonyeni municipality is situated in the KZN province. This municipality is actually doing well. This is evidenced by a surplus. This is actually despite the high energy losses. Members should take note on this one to say that these energy losses were actually within benchmarks in the previous financial year, which is the 2020-21 financial year. This municipality is applying for a guideline increase of 15.1%, and the tariffs are within the NERSA benchmarks or below. These tariffs are recommended for approval in line with the tariff analysis sheet, and the recommendations start on page 381 of 393. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Tatisha. Members, any questions or points of enhancement or any other issue may have on this application? If there's none, may I request that we move to recommendations on page 381, paragraph 8, which is that we must approve, or rather the REC approve the tariffs as recommended as per the analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July, and that the municipality be requested to submit the smart plan in order to reduce energy losses to an acceptable level range and submit the reports on a biannual basis to NERSA starting on the 30th of September 2023. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you support the recommendations? Thank you, Ms. Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Komete. Thank you, Mr. Mkize. I do support. We then move on to the next one, which is the last one for today, is Umkanyakude. Ms. Mapiting.
Thank you, Chairperson. Umkanyakude District Municipality is situated in the KZN. The district is applying for guideline increase. The performance of the electricity business within the district is not satisfactory, as indicated by the high deficit and high energy losses. Chairperson, this Munich form part of the ICU one. The issue here is the collection rate. Upon engagement with this Munich Chairperson, we discovered that the Munich did not have a revenue manager for the past 10 years. However, they appointed the manager last month. The tariff are fine, and recommendation is on page 393. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Mapiting. Members, any questions, issues, or points of enhancements on this particular application? If there's none, may I request that we move on to page 393, paragraph 9, which is to approve the tariffs as recommended in the analysis sheet for implementation on 1 July 2023, and that the municipality must monitor the performance of its energy losses in line with the set plan and submit to NERSA quarterly progress report starting on the 30th of September, and that the municipality implement efficient credit control measures in order to improve its debt collection rate. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you approve the recommendations as presented? Thank you, Mr. Mkize, Mr. Komete, Ms. Maseti. I also support. I think we have come to the end of our open session of the meeting. May I request the Matija to stop the streaming, but before that, let me thank all our stakeholders who have attended this particular part of our meeting. Thank you. Please, Mr. Mateja.